A bit over a year ago, I made a video, which was one of my earliest after becoming a Xenoblade channel, called Flesh Eaters Explained, in which I explained Flesh Eaters and, to a smaller extent, Blade Eaters to the best of my abilities at the time. And while I do think it actually holds up pretty well in terms of actual video quality, information-wise, it definitely doesn't. Namely because we were missing a few pieces of the puzzle when I released that video. Because a little something called Torna the Golden Country was released after that, and featured another Flesh Eater as a playable party member that we'd only seen as an NPC beforehand, as well as getting to see a Flesh Eater before the transformation. So I'm going to basically make an updated version of that previous video, talking about some things I did there, some things I didn't, and just explaining now what we know about Flesh and Blade Eaters. This will require spoilers through the end, I'll say, of both Xenoblade 2 games, because I'm going to go a bit deeper than the Chapter 7 cutoff I made last time. So, let's get started with Flesh Eaters. They are described in the main game as what happens when you infuse human cells into a blade, which changes certain things. We know a few Flesh Eaters, and those are Minoth, later known as Cole, Akos, Patroka, Nia, Jin, as well as a random common blade that doesn't get any dialogue or plot significance, but is just used by Amalthus as an assassin in the end credits of Torna, and that random common blade is important because that does actually change up a few things we knew. There are also several ways to achieve Flesh Eater status. It's known as a fact, and this is sort of considered the main way, that you can use technology originating from the lost nation of Judicium, which used the Titan that's now Temperantia as its home, because you can find their capital there, and that they developed an actual mechanical process for creating Flesh Eaters out of blades and humans. Judicium is revealed in Torna to be the predecessor nation to Indal, so that's how Indal ended up with the Flesh Eater technology and began basically using them as weapons. The blades that we know as a fact were made using this method are Minoth, as well as the random common in the credits, because, well, Minoth was Amalthus's blade, so he's definitely done that. And the other guy was either Amalthus's blade or Amalthus's lackey's blade, so, you know, there's kind of no other way. Jin, when he became a Flesh Eater, had access to a non-technology related method that was sort of a ritual thing that didn't necessarily involve actually consuming the body, but did somehow involve taking Laura's heart into him. He found this out somehow with a previous driver, wrote it down in his journal, then found that journal in Torna, and used that method because he didn't want to lose Laura. Akos and Patroka didn't seem to use the Judician method, so they could have used a Tantalese version of this ritual thing, or something else along those lines. We're not really sure, but they were Flesh Eaters from Tantal, so it's unlikely that they used the Indaline method because of the way Indal and Tantal were related at the time. Nia's method that she used was also unknown, but her father found out about her and about the Flesh Eater process while he was trying to look up the cure for some weird disease his daughter had, so he could have possibly discovered some text from Indal that hadn't been censored or whatever explaining it, or a similar thing just describing the Flesh Eater ritual as a medical process and just instructed Nia to do that from there. Now, as for the abilities a Flesh Eater gets, first off, you retain everything you had as a blade beforehand. And second off, you get what Minoth refers to as the main ability, or it's heavily implied that this is what he considers his most important ability, which is the ability to use one's full power without your driver being present. Normally, blades require them needing to be near a driver and able to transmit their little ether cable to them in order to use their full power. That's kind of a caveat in how the blade system was originally designed. You have to have driver and blade working together in order for things to work. And that's what makes Flesh Eaters so dangerous. They can operate and do their full power thing without a driver present, which means they don't need their driver there too in order to, say, fight someone at full power. This seems to be some sort of result of the human cells inside the blade overriding some driver-related thing where they can sort of feedback loop and act as their own driver. Sort of connected to this is also the ability for a Flesh Eater to allow anyone to use their power as a driver would. There's a lot of this in non-canon stuff because you can awaken all the Torna blades, but in the main story of the two games, you have Minoth with Adam and Nia with Rex. They work functionally, at least gameplay-wise, the same as a blade that either of the drivers had just awakened normally. This might just be a gameplay caveat, but the way I see it isn't actually the same as bonding to a blade. Since a Flesh Eater always has access to their full power, and can still do blade transfer energy stuff if their driver is actually there, we just never really see a Flesh Eater fighting with their original driver at any point. So they could just toss their weapon to someone they want to act as their driver, and beam their power into that, and effectively, it's the exact same thing, because they're at full power, and they can also beam that power into something being held by another driver. I'm guessing you'd still need to have driver aptitude in order to do this with a Flesh Eater, just because you're still channeling ether through a blade weapon, which is probably part of the thing that holds people back from being able to awaken blades in the first place. Also, this seems to tie into the fact that Flesh Eaters can become drivers themselves and awaken their own blades. Nia does it, as well as Akos and Petroka, so this isn't just something locked to specific powerful Flesh Eaters. It's likely that every single one can do it. Minoth just chose not to, Jin didn't for very obvious reasons, and there you go. The whole being your own driver thing also seems to be the way Flesh Eaters can survive after their original driver has passed away. Literally everyone we see in the game does this at some point, except probably the common dude. Again, this is just because Flesh Eaters are independent of their driver, so they'll only die when their body physically deteriorates, which is the drawback. They can become physically mortal. First off, since they're not tied to a driver, there's no returning to your core crystal for safety. If you die, since there's no second person to finish the fight or whatever. And also, a lot of Flesh Eaters experience heavy deterioration, which we'll talk about later, because any additional effects of the Flesh Eater conversion process vary on the blade that was used originally and the cells that blade consumed. We're told that a very large amount, at least with the indol method, fail completely in their process and deteriorate, hence us only seeing one common Flesh Eater despite them being effectively mass-produced. And we only see that in the past, which implies that a lot of the rest of them just kind of completely faded away, and Indal didn't make more because they had Blade Eaters now, which again we'll talk about later. Minoth was very likely a rare blade type in terms of power before his conversion, and after it, he could stand up to the very stacked Torna party, actually. Like, the Torna group as a whole is more powerful. The average blade in Torna's party is more powerful than the average blade in the base game's party, but he's definitely not stronger than Mithra or even pre-Flesh Eater Jin. It's likely that since he was stronger to begin with, it took him a lot longer to deteriorate than all the other Indal method Flesh Eaters. We know as a fact that he was able to fight when Vandam was a bit younger and adult than when we see him in the game, so it definitely didn't get bad to where he couldn't fight at all for at least 400 years, which is great compared to all the other blades, so it's very likely that Indal just took whatever blades they can get, not rares, just whatever commons they could get their hands on, and just did that. Minoth happened to work out better just because he was already better. We have no idea how anything happened with Akos and Petroka, but they were probably closer to Minoth than Nia and Jin. So they can stand up to Blade Eater Mick because they're all virtually the same power when you fight them as a trio, which is important because we're told that Blade Eaters are supposed to be more powerful than Flesh Eaters, so it's possible that they used a non-Indaline method and it's just the Indaline one that was flawed, and that's why Blade Eaters were stronger than Indaline Flesh Eaters, but I don't know. They seem to be very recent Flesh Eaters because Malas only met Jin recently, and they were both present when Akos and Petroka joined Torna, so they might not have even been around for long enough to show signs of deteriorating, even if they were the bad kind. Nia actually got a pretty decent survival. She hasn't deteriorated yet, although she fears it, obviously, and got a massive buff to her healing. She was already a renowned healer, which is how her father found out about her in the first place, but it's highly unlikely that she already had her ridiculous regeneration power. That just kind of seems to be a Flesh Eater related thing, because that's leagues above any other healer blade we see in the game. Dromark is also supposedly a good healer blade, like a renowned one, because Nia's father also awakened him, and he can't do anything remotely resembling what she could do, so it was likely a Flesh Eater boost. Jin got a huge boost in his cold powers. He couldn't generate as much ice or do absolute zero before, which he can now after becoming a Flesh Eater, and he got his elementary particle ability. So it looks like the best of Flesh Eaters get a boost to their existing abilities as well as one new power that's sort of related to it. Jin is definitely deteriorating though, because he can barely hold himself together after 500 years, which is kinda bad. Although we can see from him in Torna as a playable character and in base game as both playable and boss that he does use a lot of the same techniques, but after becoming a Flesh Eater they're amped up to like 40, though he can suppress them when he wants to, which is when he has his mask on mostly. Obviously, out of universe this was done so they could save money and not have to make completely new animations, but it does make sense that since his cold powers got boosted, he would just use the same arts he already had, they're just more powerful, and then develop new ones based around the abilities he also got. So why does any of this stuff vary? First off, the power someone originally had before their conversion. Jin and Nia were already top tier blades before they became Flesh Eaters, and that just made them even stronger. Minoth was high tier, not necessarily top tier, and he was still respectable, while commons are just kinda iffy commons, basically. It also might be tied to the method, because the Indal blades seem to have a far worse track record than any of the other ones. The only other one we know the exact method of was Jin, and yeah, he's deteriorating too, but that took much longer than any Indal blade besides Minoth, and also it was described as his power tearing him apart as opposed to his body deteriorating, which is a different thing. So it's a little iffy there, but one thing that is almost certainly a factor is the closeness the blade has to the person whose cells they were infused with. Indal blades got random people, while Nia got someone she was close enough to call a sister, and everyone else got their actual drivers. Akos and Petroka do seem like they're stronger than Minoth, but weaker than Jin and Nia, and they became Flesh Eaters because they wanted to stay together and seem to have a relatively close bond with their old drivers. Jin became one because he wanted to keep himself from forgetting Laura and to try and bring her back after she died, and they definitely have one of the closest driver-blade bonds we have on record. Nia became one to keep her sister from dying, and she was borderline brainwashed into thinking she was actually part of the biological family. So while yeah, she didn't really revive the dead girl, she basically became her in most aspects, so I'd say that's also pretty close. And all in all, Flesh Eaters are very important to the general theme of bonds that's flying around a lot in the Xenoblade 2 duology, which, you know, makes a lot of sense since the invisible ties that bind were once literally represented by chains connecting driver and blade, but that was toned down a bit to light ropes. With that said though, it's Blade Eater time, and I've got a bit more to say about Blade Eaters than I did before because we got a lot of cool new stuff from Torna. We already knew that Blade Eaters are basically the inverse of Flesh Eaters, a human that's been implanted with part or an entire core crystal. And the ones we see throughout the two games are Gort, Zeke, Mikhail, Amalthus, and tons of Gort-like random Blade Eaters in the ending of Torna. Now, Blade Eaters are fully technology-based. The only known method involves Indaline tech, and was most likely based on an iterated-on Flesh Eater technology. We see in Torna that they were developed during the Aegis War as weapons by Amalthus and Stanif the Researcher, Gort being the original successful subject. Originally, people turned into these giant hulking abominations and completely lost their minds, see Gort, but over time the process was improved. Amalthus and Zeke only get parts of a core crystal, but Mick does get an entire one, and it doesn't seem to affect anything in his personality or physiology. Obviously, when we see him as a Blade Eater, he's a much different character, but that's probably because, you know, living through 500 years, all the trauma and stuff, and you can already see him start to go down that path at the end of Torna. So the core crystal in him, while it gave him blade weapons and the ability to become a driver, possibly, we don't know if he had the aptitude beforehand or if having the core crystal gave it to him, but it definitely didn't affect any of that stuff. I mentioned before, but Staniff describes Blade Eaters as being more powerful than Flesh Eaters. This might just mean the monster ones are more powerful than in-the-line method Common Blade Flesh Eaters, because that's definitely accurate. Gort is a struggle for Laura with her full team at the strongest power they ever had before they died, so that definitely means that he was more powerful than Minoth or a common Flesh Eater, but at the same time, Mick isn't much stronger than Akos or Patroka, although Amalthus does take 4 Flesh Eaters, plus Numa, plus other blades to defeat him, so it's kind of unsure what that means. We do know, though, that when becoming a Blade Eater, you can have part of a crystal implanted, an entire crystal implanted, or many crystals implanted. Partial crystal seems to require it to be the Eater's own blade, in order to, I guess, keep the blade from getting destroyed when they do the implanting, and it grants the driver direct use of some of that blade's power, while the blade themselves doesn't seem to be weakened at all. Haze with only half her crystal can still weaken Mithra and Jin, which is about on par with how she was able to partially weaken Malos when she had her entire crystal. Amalthus gets half of Haze's crystal, and gains full use of her weakening power, although he has to actually amplify it in order to do what he wanted to with it. Zeke only has a small part of Pandoria's core crystal, and all he gets out of it is a pacemaker and maybe a stronger weapon. Obviously, he's using the electricity power in there to keep his heart going after he was injured in his chest, and that technology and becoming a Blade Eater was what was used to bring him back to life, basically. But he also has the Big Bang Edge as his weapon when using Pandy. When she uses her specials, she has a smaller staff which is part of the bigger weapon, but not the entire thing. We don't see this anywhere else with a Driver Blade thing. They always have the same weapon between Driver and Blade. So this might just be the fact that Zeke has a bit of Pandoria's power, so he can use that to enhance his weapon and make it into something that's more his style to wield as opposed to a dinky staff. Can you really picture Zeke using a dinky staff? Not really. Like, even when he uses a bit ball, he chucks that thing. So giving him that flimsy looking of a weapon just kind of wouldn't work for him. It's not his style. Having a full crystal implant, in addition to giving the driver access to the weapons that the blade they're implanted with had, it also might give driver aptitude. Mick is definitely a driver, but we don't know if he had aptitude before or after he became a Flesh Eater, or if he developed it over time after becoming a Blade Eater. I said Blade Eater instead of Flesh Eater, or Flesh Eater instead of Blade Eater, ignore that. Or if being implanted gave him aptitude since he was able to summon blade weapons. The modern version of multi-crystal implanting seems to result in a more controllable monster form. Amalthus was a Blade Eater before he hulked out, but he only had half a crystal before then. He only hulked out after he just implanted every core crystal Indal had, and that is a lot more than half of one. The other important thing is Bond doesn't seem to play a factor with Blade Eaters, since you can implant a core that's never been awakened, or one that you as a driver have never awakened, and Amalthus and Haze were enemies. So there's definitely no bond power there, and Amalthus can still use her power perfectly. Mick has an unawakened core crystal in him. Amalthus has hundreds, if not thousands, of core crystals in him. And obviously, if a bond played a factor in it, they would all be jockeying for control and probably rip him apart, which doesn't happen. It actually takes a fight to do that. Also, New Game Plus isn't canon, but Zeke having the Eye of Shining Justice would be a counterpoint to the bond thing, because it's an extremely powerful ability that seems to result from his connection to Pandoria. So, there you go. This bond thing is also probably why Indal was looking into it, because they only really had access to common blades, and those Flesh Eaters weren't turning out great. So, if they realized that they could use the same core crystals and make something more powerful and more reliable than a Flesh Eater, because, again, Blade Eaters are more powerful than common Flesh Eaters, and don't seem to have the deteriorating thing while also gaining the driver abilities, possibly a power boost, and the immortality. So you could see why they went that way and just kind of stopped with Flesh Eaters in favor of Blade Eaters. The other question I posed in the old video was whether or not Rex is a Blade Eater. My decision there was, I don't know, Aegis breaks all the other rules, so while he has half of an Aegis core crystal, that could mean anything. And honestly, I still don't know. So, it doesn't really matter in the long run because it doesn't affect things too much, and I don't really have any strong feelings either way, so make your own opinions, and yeah, that's basically it. If I think of something that'll actually change things related to that, I'll probably make a smaller video. I don't think I could extend that to more than a Xenobites, but yeah, there we go. That is all I have for today, though, so thank you so much for watching. If you don't follow my community tab, which I don't know why you would do that, I barely post on it, I ordered all the Xenogear stuff, I got all the Xenogear stuff, everything is working almost perfectly, I just need one more cable to get everything in complete working order, so I will be able to start playing that, start recording that, start the second channel soon. Yes, the new art for this channel is coming, I just haven't had time to talk to the artist yet and finalize the stuff I'm going with. But that's cool, Xenogears is coming soon, and yeah, thank you to all my patrons who made all this stuff happen. It's kind of sad having to thank everyone in past tense because I just got all the stuff that I wanted the patron money to get, and I will be changing up the Patreon scheme to be a lot kinder and basically try not to get as much money as I'm getting right now because I already hit the goal and I kind of feel guilty taking much more after that. But anyway, thank you to Satsuru Yokoi, Lily Starflame, Dead Pat, new patron Luke John Grande, and Jenkles for your continued support, as well as our shout-out tier Barracks and that good old fanfiction.net page, which you could find in the description if you want to check out some content made by one of my patrons. But yeah, that's all I got. I said that multiple times already. Until next time, when I will do something that I'm not sure about yet, this is Luxon, signing off.